Welcome to SSI Meetup. Today we'll be talking with Danny Zuckerman. He's the co-founder of Freebox, and he will be telling us more about where Freebox is coming from, how it started, and it's really an exciting project that it's also invested by Union Square Ventures, which is one of the top venture capital firms in the United States, and it's a good sign to see that top VC firms in the United States are getting invested into the SSI space. So let us quickly summarize in the next slide what SSI Meetup is about. What we're trying to achieve is to empower global SSI communities, and we do that by making all this content open to everyone. So if you're a person anywhere in the world, a company or a group of people that is trying to empower SSI around the world, this is the place to do that. And to do that, we share all the information and all this knowledge with the Creative Commons by Share Alike license. Today you will have Danny from Freebox presenting what they are doing, and you will be able to reuse his insights and knowledge to share that around the world. A lot of people are doing that already. You have people from all over the world, even creating local meetups. We have one happening in Korea, other ones where people have been using them in the UK, Canada, and different places of Europe and South America. So that's really cool because you can take the Google slide deck that we will publish after this, and we will also publish the video, and you can go through the 40 sessions we've done so far. This is session number 40, and you can use all that material. Today, if you have any questions, just please use the question tool that you have here in the webinar and bring up your questions. I'll share them with Danny if relevant at the moment. If not, we'll share those questions at the end of the presentation. And yeah, without further ado, thank you so much, Danny, for joining us today.
Thanks, Alex. Excited to be here. We have been following lots of the SSI Meetup content and have wanted to be part of it for a very long time since you got started about last year. So appreciate you making it happen and appreciate everybody else who logged on here, who watches this on video. We're excited to share a bit about Freebox, the company and what we're building, but also just the approach that we're taking and some of our views on SSI. I think a lot of them will overlap with what's been shared previously, but some are a bit different. And so hopefully we can add to the dialogue a bit. So I guess I flipped ahead a little bit, but as Alex did say, I'm one of the co-founders of Freebox. Like my two co-founders, Michael Senna and Joel Tordenson, we've been in the identity space in various ways for a number of years, predating Freebox. Some of you may be familiar with UPort. All of us worked on it. Michael was actually a co-founder there. We've been involved in the diff and talking to many folks in the SSI world for quite a while. And so Freebox was kind of the next evolution of our work in this space. So I won't spend too much time on the upfront pieces here because I think they've been covered very well in previous SSI meetups and they overlap quite well. Our thinking overlaps quite well with what others in the space have done a very good job articulating. But we share the view that we're moving towards a more secure, more data-rich, more user-centric model for online applications enabled by SSI. We think there's a lot of reasons that self-sovereign identity or user-centric models of data and identity are really important, and some of them are ethical, some of them are around security, but we also just think it's a more powerful way to build online applications. And so today our data and our identity is scattered across many different applications and services, and that comes with poor security and lack of control and an insufficient picture of who we are. And we believe we now have the tech with cryptographic methods and distributed data to basically flip the model and have all of those apps center around us. So again, nothing hugely new in our vision there. To us, the big question has always been, how do we get there? Because it's, the tech may be there or maybe getting there, but there's a huge existing world of built up infrastructure to serve the previous model. It just works for a lot of use cases. A lot of people have invested in that and learned to build around that and learn to trust the centralized providers who do guarantee certain things in that model. And we're not building in a vacuum. People have to choose to adopt the solutions that we're building around self-sovereign identity. And that's not always, people aren't always in a position to make the choice that just ethically aligns with what they believe. There are business realities and convenience realities. And so we need to play within that kind of context. And so that's been kind of the question we've been trying to answer over the last couple of years. So as we got started with 3Box, we kind of had a core guiding principle of like, we need to be building for the future, but serving the needs of real users right now. Even if the markets start small, even if the user base starts small, we need to be solving real problems for the people who are using what we're building, and it's not just POCs. So very quickly for end users, a lot of this is just make it work well like they're used to. So effortless onboarding, not having to download new things, convenient experiences that are personalized and relevant and valuable, because that's what they get in the current model today most of the time. And they want more security but without burden, and things just have to work. And then at least as importantly, perhaps more importantly on the developer side, what are developers actually, they might support this model, they might believe it's going to help them long term, but what about today? They want to acquire users. If they're taking a risk, it better help them get more business. They want to be able to focus more on the things that are valuable, that they're doing uniquely, not having to manage more infra. And so if we are adding infrastructure and headache to their plates rather than reducing it, we're probably not doing our jobs very well. They want more data, so they're happy in a lot of cases to cede control and ownership of the data, but a lot of great experiences require data, and so having a rich data set is actually important. And they want a simple overhead, and they also want things to just work. And so it was kind of this set of requirements and thinking that led us to kind of create 3Box in a more formal way. So as Alex said, we've been part of this community for quite a while and working on identity for quite a while. Some of you may be familiar with Consensus and with UPort, where we worked previously. And so we, because kind of shared a lot of the intentions of UPort, but a little bit of a different view on the exact needs we want to serve, 3Box kind of spun out of UPort about this time last year. And then again, as Alex mentioned earlier this year, we actually spun out of Consensus. So 3Box is now a completely independent company pursuing kind of a different and independent product vision. And we did raise, not from Union Square Ventures actually, but from the founder of Union Square, Brad Burnham. He's now a venture partner there, as well as at a firm called Placeholder, which focuses on things like this. And so it was through Placeholder that he made his investment. That kind of some other great supporters, including the folks we've been working with in the past. But what 3Box really is a framework for building distributed apps with self-sovereignty built in. And so it is not a self-sovereign solution first, a self-sovereign solution just kind of in the way that it's implemented. What we're really trying to do is make it easy and appealing for developers to build distributed apps. And so what we give is user accounts and profiles without any new software sign up, reliable data storage for your application that interoperates across apps by default, really rich social features that are easy to drop in, which has not really been possible in a distributed way before, and enables just a portable social graph across these different applications. And really what we're building is a way for people to have fully featured service apps with just a front end. So faster to build, easier to manage, but full feature set. And secure and private by design because of that, without them having to do much else. And so that is the core value prop that we think can start to get self-sovereign identity into far more user hands and into the kind of roadmap of a lot more developers beyond the ones who just ethically want to make it happen. So how do we do that? Apologies for the arrows going everywhere, but I will try to make it fairly easy to understand. What we built is delivered through 3Box SDK, distributed storage for basically various types of data, for profiles, for messages, for content, basically for anything else. And so the core primitives underneath this are similar for each of these different stores, basically. But sorry. So I'll just like walk through, and we've kind of released these each as their own profile space, because while they share kind of the underlying primitives, they are each a bit specific, and developers want it to just be very easy to drop in. So the first one is a profile space with both a public and a private profile, where users can map to their keys a username, a photo, their actual name, Twitter verifications, GitHub verifications, kind of a subset of basic profile info. I want to make it very clear, this is not what some people think of as like an identity solution. We're not doing KYC. We are not doing proof of individuality or anti-Sybil or any of the many other things that identity can mean. What this is profile data that can be taken with you from app to app, so that you have a really rich, easy onboarding experience and a shared set of, for example, people that you follow. And that apps can leverage that without having to onboard you all over again and ask for your information again. So that's kind of shared across apps. There's also storage spaces, which are app-specific spaces to store any kind of data like preferences or settings or anything that's just very app-specific or sensitive, because users give access to that storage space kind of on a one-off. So it's kind of a sandboxed area. So for example, MetaMask, which some of you may know as the most used Ethereum wallet provider, is storing there. It's backing up users' preference and setting and token watch list and contact data to $3 so that you have this cloud storage functionality or saving it with the user. And then Threads is where, as one person in our community said recently, where $3 gets chatty. It's our social shared storage spaces. And so for messages, for chat, for comments, there's different implementations of it, but basically it's a feed store shared between 2 or more users or on an application. And now you can start to have this social data and content be stored with the user, still used on a platform, and follow you around from app to app. And so people are doing some very exciting things with that. So the way that this actually works and how self-sovereign identity and kind of how we're using those data products to drive self-sovereign identity, this is, I think, a very slightly outdated, or at least outdated design architecture. We don't believe a user is going to have just one key on any given network, nor are they all going to use any one wallet, nor are they all going to actually be super thoughtful about their different keys, just like we saw with Web2 usernames and passwords and OAuth, etc. So users are going to have lots of different keys on lots of different networks, managed by lots of different wallets, most likely. At least we have to plan for that. And because of our goals of not making any extra burden for users or developers, we're fine with that. We want to meet developers where they are. Whatever signature types they're using, whatever wallets they're planning for is completely fine. What we've built is, along with the kind of SDK and APIs for data storage, we've built this 3ID DID implementation and system around it. We just released version, I think, 0.3 now of Identity Wallet, which is an implementation, an SDK for our 3ID method and functionality. And among the things that does is lets us very securely and easily map many different keys and basically keys, whether they're externally owned keys or in Ethereum contract wallets or custodial keys. We can just keep mapping more and more keys to the same DID. And so a user can have a single DID that follows them across different accounts and different networks. And then that DID is what encrypts and signs and manages updates to distributed databases. And so right now we're using OrbitDB. We're also talking to the Textile team, who's building really interesting things on top of IPFS. And we can keep adding different database implementations because different developers are going to want to use different databases. And so what we have here is basically very flexible on both ends in terms of the database and data storage type that developers want to use, the key types and wallets that users want to use, and a way to just aggregate all of the data under the user's control with all of that flexibility. And so makes it network agnostic. So what we're seeing, we have been focused on Ethereum to date because that's where we've seen the most developer activity, but we can keep adding other authentication modules to support other networks, which we keep talking to wallet providers and to people building blockchain systems generally, and a lot are just by default using their cryptographic key as the address, which in some ways is self-sovereign, but it doesn't have interoperability because then it's limited to that network. So this provides that. Our DID is IPFS based, so it's super scalable and not limited to any one chain, and just, again, very flexible. So we've had a lot of developers across different spaces kind of come into our Discord hey, I was planning to come here and ask questions, but it actually after 30 minutes I was up and running. This is the easiest getting started I've ever had. And so, you know, there's still plenty of work to be done, but so far this seems to be making devs' lives much easier and making them embrace the did ideology and method much more quickly than what we'd seen before. So there we go. We have been, again, focused on some of these distributed app builders, the ones who are kind of most in line with what we're trying to build and ready for, because they haven't had other solutions. But we think that this data first and reduced complexity focused approach is going to be really appealing to a lot of developers. And this is certainly not 100% accurate diagrams, but if you talk to people building apps and products and services today and like, you know, listen to their architecture they have or kind of walk through how they have to build their identity and data systems and into their even like simple media sites, it's just an overwhelming amount of management, especially as we have things like GDPR and other regulations coming on board and the compliance burdens are getting higher and the risk of any breach, even small ones, having both big security consequences and big PR consequences is just a massive liability that comes with complexity. Not to mention it's just distracting from the core value. And when we make it flexible enough to serve devs' needs, but have this self-sovereign approach to data and focus on kind of data solutions first, we can offer just a much more simple way to build applications, whether they're blockchain applications or any other kind of application, enterprise or media sites or you know, native mobile apps. Just the architecture gets much thinner because instead of managing on the left side all of these different pipelines and providers and hooks, you just save everything to the user. So this again is probably not a new concept to a lot of folks on this call, but it's when we focus on dropping capability, making it really easy to drop capabilities into these applications with so little overhead, you see devs' eyes just kind of widen at how easy it is, and they get something kind of that they didn't have before. So yes, the current situation is working, and there's been lots of companies that have built up huge businesses providing, you know, each of these buckets, but it's still relatively painful for devs if you show them an alternative that is a simpler architecture. So that's what we've been focusing on, is making it as easy as possible for devs to get to architectures that have self-sovereign identity. I won't like make this a product pitch, but we have 3 core SDKs that are the ways that devs are using 3box right now. Web app developers use the 3box.js SDK, which then has APIs for identity, authentication, profiles, storage, and messaging. Again, pretty easy for them to basically just like take all their data needs and use 3box.js to save data with the user. And more recently, we've pulled out what used to be embedded in 3box.js, but is now a separate SDK, Identity Wallet, which works in more circumstances. Basically, the core identity encryption and access control functionality around 3ID can go into React Native and into Node.js environments. And so seeing it built into more than just web applications and enables basically through a JSON RPC calls to the 3box SDK for data storage. And while we are hearing that that is quite easy, we're trying to make it even easier. So we've been building some React plugins, which has a whole bunch of apps just dropping completely distributed, user-controlled data into their apps in like a very modular way. And so this is a comments plugin where you can basically attach the React component to any object, website, a token, or an NFT, a picture, whatever, and just have distributed comments with, again, user-controlled data. Same for the chat box or these profile hovers. And yeah, I think this is, again, an outdated list. We've got a couple dozen apps live using it now, growing every day. And our biggest, like everything we do is open. Code is all open source, but you can basically see everything we're working on and doing on our GitHub repo. And if you drop into chat.3box.io, all of our chatter is in public discussion. We are basically trying to build as little as possible ourselves and enable the community to build lots of new things. Someone in our community yesterday released 3box extensions, a whole modular set of ways to drop $3 into even more places. I haven't even had a chance to catch up on it, but people are very excited and pushing it. And so our goal is to open it up as broadly as possible and make it used as flexibly as possible. And yeah, I guess we're trying this now. I went kind of a non-technical route, but my background coming to this, I didn't give a full bio before, but before I was in the identity world, I studied political philosophy and worked in tech and business consulting and strategy and education realm, and so I had a winding road into identity. And so I chose some books that are kind of more the philosophical angles on how I came to care about this topic and why and how I view it now. So probably one that a lot are familiar with, but I found it to be the best articulation of how we arrive very specifically at the situation we are now. And I think that's really important to understand how we can unravel it, considering the incentives that and the businesses that are at stake. So I really like The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. I actually didn't love all of Homo Deus, but the section thinking about identity and the conception of it we have today, coming from a very liberal worldview, which is not inevitable, it rung very true to me. I think it is starting to kind of our conception of that philosophy and both of kind of political philosophy and of identity is starting to unravel in very important ways. So some of you may have been involved in the radical exchange movement or seen some of the ideas there. I think there's some overlap, but I found it very thought-provoking. If any of you haven't read it, I recommend finding at least the section on the biological basis of identity in Homo Deus and elsewhere. And not to self-promote too much, but how I actually ended up kind of in the identity world firmly is I co-authored a book called Identity Theft, which again is from a much more philosophical and social point of view on identity than technical. But my mom had a stroke, and traumas like that can really shatter a sense of identity. And so it was an exploration both through her experience and many others who have gone through trauma and many academic lenses of what identity actually is. It's one of those concepts that I think, as many of us know, seems very obvious, but actually, if you try to pin it down, it means so many different things in different contexts. And so that kind of journey into the word and the philosophy is how I ended up working on the digital side of it. And these three I'd encourage anybody to dig into.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Danny. I mean, this book thing is something that we tried for the first time. I want to continue doing it in the future. I would have loved to do it before, but thank you for those recommendations. And I hope that over time, as more people recommend books, that we will see some patterns about what the best books are to learn about identity and what they recommend and what inspired them. I have plenty of questions, so if anyone wants to jump in with questions, please just use the question tool, and I share those questions with Danny. Just to get a general understanding, I mean, like this one slide where you jumped through, where you were explaining a little bit about the value proposition about what will be possible. I think it was slide number 4, like it was like about social profiles and other things. Could you give some examples about what that can mean? Like, I mean, here for example, you talk about rich social features and other things. I mean, what would be examples about how that works?
Yep. So let me look. I could actually show you guys potentially a bit of it. So I mean, rich social features that, like I showed you the comments like boxes that we've got, and so it makes it basically very easy to drop in these comments components or chat boxes or basically any other messaging formats and connect with people on an app in a very distributed way. And so when you do that, when the data, the messages themselves or the likes or anything else that's part of that experience, when those are stored with the users, the rich social features we kind of all expect in an app. If it doesn't have social features and it's meant to, then it's just like not going to be that engaging, and everything we do is fairly social online today. If it's not like a business application. The big innovation here is the portable social graph. And today, if you have an interaction on Facebook, that data is saved with Facebook, and you can't bring your graph and your history with those people to LinkedIn or to a new app. When comments and messages in chat are happening and saved with the users, that means, for example, right now, 3box, let me see if I can share. So 3box today, this is the 3box Hub app. Most of what we do is dev tools, but we do have kind of an example and data management user-facing app as well. So I'm following just a few people because I just unfollowed a bunch for another demo. But I can go see my co-founder, Michael Senna's wall. And you can see all of these messages, or at least the most recent one, the others are loading, that have been like posted on his wall. And if this were Twitter or Facebook, that would be stuck here on 3box. He's got some other more recent ones. Because it's stored actually with us as users, and that's where the data is stored, that kind of edge between us and the data within that edge, now any other app can request access to that history and pull that feed into their app and innovate on it and add reactions or emojis to it. Or we can take that connection, that following feature, and not have that be just within the 3box context, but now if a wallet wants to use that following list, which is stored with us as users, they can use that to make it a contact list and easily send, I can now easily send money to Michael without having to like go add him as a follower again. And so it's that portable social graph element that is new, and that as people add chat and messages, they're kind of building by default right now. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I have another question coming in here from Roman. Roman is asking, who's your target market? Is it the enterprise world, or who is it if not?
Yeah, right now it's anyone building startups. So people who have a lot of built up infrastructure, like in the enterprise world, are both kind of have to undo more of the old world infrastructure. And because we're not focused on kind of identity and credentials, which can kind of add on top of that, but rather like the core data infrastructure, that's like going to be a longer time, I think. We also have a lot of others in the space, including UPort and I think Evernym and probably many others who I think are doing a good job working with bigger enterprises. And so we're a small team. Quite early, we're going to focus on startups and new builders for now.
Okay. What is the difference between what UPort is doing and what 3box is doing? Is it like complementary, or is it like more about an architectural aspect that is different?
So I don't want to speak for the latest of what UPort is doing. We're still quite close with the folks on that team and big supporters, but don't talk to them as regularly as I'd like. My sense is that they are a bit more enterprise focused now. They also have a mobile wallet, so it's kind of their own software, whereas we're trying to work as more middleware with existing software, including UPort wallet. So I think it's quite complementary. I don't think I think we're share a design based on DIDs and a lot of the same mission, but are going about things with both very different products and very different markets.
Okay. But I mean, just to understand, because I mean, this is something that I've been hearing a lot in the market. What is, because I mean, like the consensus. I mean, there might have been more than I know about, but like at least I mean, it's for a long time it gave the impression that within consensus that UPort was like the main identity play, and in the last 12 months, I mean, there have been a number of changes. Like, I mean, UPort is of course still there. Then 3box came out, and then like the whole just like this identity group led by Ruben, I understand, and Christian, like pushing identity across consensus. What is the difference in approach there about like how I mean, what is your reasoning about how you think, okay, this is what we believe makes more sense for the identity world, the way you're approaching it, where you were just saying right now, like, okay, this is less about verifiable credentials or DIDs, we're trying to manage mainly data. So is there like a fundamental difference there, or is it just, I mean, what is the approach?
Yeah, so again, I don't want to speak for others at Consensus or UPort, but I think it's a little bit what you just said. Our view has been identity is it's not a single problem. It's a collection of many different challenges that is going to have many different solutions that work together. Identity is an industry, it's a concept, and we at 3box for sure don't want to be tackling all of them. There's many teams working on authentication and key management, and that's not we would rather work with them than build that ourselves, and that's true for 20 other domains around identity. We are focused on getting distributed data into a really good framework for devs to build apps in a way that the data is safe with users. And so we think that that's a critical part of what kind of a more self-sovereign web looks like, but it's not the only part. It's just the one that we're focused on.
Okay. Stevie is asking, for the enterprises that need a level of monitoring of employee communications and ability to close access, can they achieve this level of control with 3box's architecture? Where's the data, the keys, where are they stored? Are they with the employee?
Yeah, so the keys are with the user. A user can choose to give, like right now, all of the data is symmetrically encrypted, and users can choose to give decryption access to any given app or to another user or to potentially an employer. I would say that 3box is not designed for that right now. Again, it's not designed for internal enterprise use cases, and there are certain situations like that that probably have requirements, whether they're legal or business, that 3box is not geared towards right now. We are going to be building more and more sophisticated and granular access control to do things like that over time, but that will happen, in steps. And so right now, it's getting more. It's definitely not an all-in-one, like you have access or you don't. We have the sandbox spaces, but like we'll be adding ways to get much more specific over time and to give delegated access over time.
Awesome. What is the level of, about community participation you have right now? You said like you have different people participating, and what are you doing there, and like how are you incentivizing community participation? Because at least it's something that I see in a lot of SSI projects where everyone is trying to attract developers and people around it, but it seems like there's like not enough people around. SSI is still so small, at least in the collective consciousness of the bigger world, that it seems like that everyone is competing for the same small amount of people trying to develop the SSI communities. What's your view on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say we look at it a little bit differently. We certainly do want to encourage more people to be building with 3box, and we have a very active community. Drop by chat.3box.io and you can interact with them. It's growing quite quickly, and now just like staying up to date with it is getting a bit tough for our small team, which is exciting, but also a challenge. I think our bigger goal than like winning the small community of folks that are currently trying to build in or around SSI is to grow the number of people that should want to be building with these concepts. And so we think there's a whole world of developers who don't care that much about self-sovereign identity as a concept, or they might care, but they also have other considerations that like they just need to build a product that works really well and easily. And so we're just trying to grow the overall pie of people who can use some of these concepts by building really easy dev tools and infrastructure that just happens to have SSI as the backbone of it. And so we're seeing a lot of developers who were choosing to work with other solutions before 3box was ready, now saying, okay, great, decentralized profiles just work and we can drop it in, and it's worth doing that. And that doesn't preclude them working with other identity providers as well, but we'll kind of drop in the data infrastructure and start to grow the overall pie of people in the realm of SSI.
Thank you. There's like a longer text question that I will read out now, and it's coming from Juan. He's saying, coming back to that social graph aspect, is anyone looking at the expert functions of Facebook or Instagram that they begrudgingly pushed after GDPR to make user data nominally portable? is there anyone working on a scraper to reconnect you to your social graph in those apps on Freebox?
So we've heard people talk about it, and I think at some hackathons have seen like the beginnings of it. I haven't seen a fully working version of it yet, but we certainly would love to see that.
Okay. Final question coming here from David. If anyone else has any questions, please pop in. If not, I'll ask one or two more questions that I would like to check too. David is asking, what is Freebox's revenue model? Apologies if I missed this.
Nope, I didn't cover it. So right now, we are not charging for anything. And of course, the core distributed data network and the user data, we will never and can never charge for because it's not at all trapped behind anything that we're doing. Freebox could disappear and users could still take it with them. We have built a number of value add services on top of that. Caching to boost performance, and we're running all of the nodes right now. We'll make it very easy for others to run nodes, but if you don't want to, we can run yours for you. So there's some services like that that we may begin to charge for. We'll have a more complete answer to that probably the very end of or early next year.
Okay. Two last questions I would like to ask if there's no one else who wants to ask any more questions. How is the level of decentralization today? Where are the weak points of decentralization today, which is usually what I see happens in most SSI projects in this early stage, and if centralization is still low today, how do you envision to change that over time?
Yep. So there's definitely some aspects today that are a bit centralized up and down the stack, some of which we and the devs building on us are fine with, some of which will change in the fairly near term. And so, like, for example, I just talked about like distributed data is low performance. We're running a caching service on top of that to make it very high performance. Everyone we've talked to is great with that because if you really need a fully trusted version, you run your own node or access the underlying network. But if you want to trust the caching service provider, and for now us, but others can run it too, then you use the centralized version. So that's the kind of like practical trade-off that I think we'll continue to make for quite a while. In terms of one that will change sooner, right now, the address server, so basically the mapping between the user's DID or 3ID and their Orbit DB stores, which is where the data is actually stored. That mapping is on a 3-box server right now, and that has been fine to date. But we will put that mapping in the public domain pretty soon, and we're evaluating the options to do that, and we'll probably have some news on that in the next month or two.
Awesome. One final question that might sound controversial, but that's not the intention. It's like, I mean, when you check the public blockchain networks, like Ethereum is clearly like one of the biggest and most important ones. But one of the critiques that some people bring up, which I think applies to almost any network, any public blockchain network, is that you have many different applications or use cases that get deployed and promoted, but most of those don't have any real traction or scalability in the sense that people are really using them in a bigger scale. So assuming that you agree with that, if you do not agree with that, please just share it too. What do you see like the use case today that you think has the most traction, or the use case that or the application that you're supporting that will have the most traction, where you go beyond this storyline like, hey, yeah, we're doing this and we are running all these things, but in reality, when you look under the hood, you see that there's really little action. Yes, you have a tool that people can use, but very few people are using it in reality.
Yeah, so I do agree with the general sentiment that there's not a whole lot of usage or users in the space yet. Is the question like, where do we expect big usage to come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I would say we're, and I in particular, not trying to be in the business of like picking the apps that are going to go huge or anything. I do think that we're starting to see generally more well-rounded and sophisticated products where like a good UX doesn't just mean we no longer have terrible onboarding, but rather are actually like delivering pretty valuable services. Some of those are still quite niche. So there's been some kind of enterprise products come out of, I think, like the last batch of a few accelerators that are targeting like very acute needs in the enterprise context, for managing funds, for example, or some interesting folks doing things with credentialing. We've also seen like some interesting games and gambling. Not that we want to like be supporting gambling, but Pool Together is really interesting, like finding ways to like leverage the unique properties of blockchain to do something new that attracts excitement. So we're keeping close tabs. I do think people have been predicting big things for DeFi and games for a while, but I think just generally we're starting to see more sophisticated products that make the kind of practical trade-offs needed. Don't try to decentralize everything at once, but use either blockchain or distributed data for like new features. So I'm not sure that's going to like skyrocket in the next month, but we think we see good signs that we'll start to continue to and then start to really take off.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts you would like to share, Danny, or like you want to go back to the final slide where you showed where people can reach out to you, and
Yep.
also like where people can learn more about Freebox? Yeah.
Yep. So please come join us, chat.3box.io. Reach out to me, Danny at 3box.io, with any questions. We'd love to work with any and all of you, and happy to answer more questions or just chat about some of these concepts anytime.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danny, for sharing like an introduction to Freebox. I think I would love to have like a more detailed architecture view of Freebox. That would be really interesting to see like all the different components. If that's possible in the future, then I'll ping you over email to check that out too, if we can organize that. And for everyone else, next stuff coming up, we have on the 19th of November, StreetCred that will be presenting. It's a company in the SSI space, pretty new too, coming out from the sovereign world, and they're trying to do developer tools to make it easier for developers in the SSI space. And then the 21st of November, we have peer DIDs with Daniel Hardman, who will be explaining what peer DIDs are and how they work in without a ledger to create a peer-to-peer network. And yeah, those are the next two. We have more stuff coming up now in December, January already planned out too, which I'll be sharing with all of you. And if you want to catch up on all this stuff, please just join our newsletter, join our Telegram channel, or Twitter, or LinkedIn, or any other network you want to use. We're on most of the important ones where you can pick those up. So Daniel, thank you so much for sharing all this with us, and I hope we'll talk soon again.
Thanks, guys, and thanks, Alex, for organizing. Thanks all.
No problem.